Let me tell you something important. A man will say many things when he likes you, but when he sees you as his future, he stops talking and starts building. You won't feel confused. You won't feel anxious. You'll feel chosen, consistently, quietly, and clearly. And once you know the signs, you'll never misread effort again. When a man truly sees you as his future, the first shift you'll notice isn't grand romance or dramatic declarations. It's something far quieter, far more reliable. He becomes consistent, without needing to be chased, reminded, or emotionally managed. And that consistency doesn't come from pressure. It comes from clarity. Before that moment, effort often feels unpredictable. One day he's fully present, attentive, emotionally warm. The next he's distant, slow to respond, unavailable without explanation. That kind of inconsistency isn't always cruelty, sometimes it's uncertainty. A man who hasn't decided yet moves in emotional spurts. He shows up when he feels inspired and disappears when life pulls his attention elsewhere. And in those gaps, the woman is left wondering what changed, what she did wrong, or whether she should do more. But when a man decides that you are his future, something internal settles. He no longer relates to you as an option that fits into his mood. He relates to you as a priority that deserves stability. His actions stop being reactive and start being intentional. He calls when he says he will. He responds without making you wait in emotional suspense. He doesn't vanish when things feel calm because calm no longer feels boring to him. It feels safe. Consistency is not about perfection. He won't always say the perfect thing. He won't always have unlimited time or energy. But what changes is the pattern. You're no longer trying to decode his behavior or read between the lines. His presence becomes predictable in the healthiest way, not because he's controlled, but because he's grounded. And here's the most important part. You didn't have to teach him how to do this. You didn't have to threaten to leave, explain your worth, or set ultimatums every week. A man who sees you as his future regulates his own behavior because he understands the value of access to you. He knows that inconsistency risks something meaningful, and he's not willing to gamble with that. When a man is unsure, he keeps emotional exits open. When he's sure, he closes them himself. You'll feel the difference in your body before you fully articulate it in your mind. The anxiety softens. The urge to check your phone constantly fades. You stop rehearsing conversations in your head. You're no longer performing or proving, you're simply being. That sense of emotional safety isn't accidental. It's built through repeated, reliable behavior over time. Consistency also shows up when life isn't smooth, when stress hits, when work overwhelms him, when distractions appear. He doesn't disappear into silence. He communicates. Even a simple message that says, "Today is heavy, but I'm thinking of you," carries weight because it tells you that difficulty doesn't remove you from his awareness. And this is where many women misunderstand their own power. They believe if they just love harder, stay patient longer, or accept inconsistency quietly, it will eventually turn into stability. But consistency is not a reward you earn through endurance. It's a signal of intention. A man gives it when he has decided, not when he is persuaded. That's why consistency feels so different from effort that comes and goes. It doesn't exhaust you. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't require you to shrink your needs. Instead, it allows you to relax into your natural rhythm because you're no longer compensating for someone else's uncertainty. A man who sees you as his future doesn't make you wonder where you stand. He understands that clarity is kindness. He understands that love, to last, must be livable, not dramatic. If you find yourself constantly questioning his interest, monitoring his patterns, or negotiating for basic presence, that's not chemistry. It's imbalance. And when consistency finally arrives, it won't feel like excitement at first. It will feel like peace. And peace is what commitment looks like before it ever speaks. When a man sees you as part of his future, something subtle but powerful begins to happen in the way he makes decisions. He starts to include you, not because you asked, not because you insisted, but because your presence has shifted from optional to essential. Your voice becomes part of the equation. And this doesn't begin with life-changing choices. It begins in the small, almost unnoticeable moments. At first, it sounds like curiosity. He asks what you think. He checks in before making plans. He considers your schedule when organizing his own. Not to seek approval, but to stay aligned. Alignment is the language of long-term thinking. A man who is only passing through your life moves independently. A man who plans to stay begins to move in rhythm. You'll notice that he doesn't just inform you after decisions are made, he brings you into the process, where he's spending his time, how he's shaping his weeks, even how he's approaching challenges. Your perspective matters. And what's important here is that this inclusion feels natural, not performative. It isn't announced, it isn't exaggerated, it's simply woven into how he operates. This is how you know it's real. He does it even when it would be easier not to. He pauses before committing to something that might affect you. He thinks ahead. He asks, does this work for us? Not because you demanded that language, but because his mind has already moved there. The future, in his imagination, now includes you by default. Many women confuse this with control or dependence, but it's neither. It's integration. Healthy men don't lose themselves in partnership. They expand their awareness. Including you in his decisions doesn't weaken him, it grounds him. It tells you that he respects your impact on his life and acknowledges that choices ripple outward when two lives are becoming connected. When a man doesn't see a future, he protects his autonomy at all costs. He makes plans and expects you to adjust. He decides first and explains later, if at all. His life is structured in a way that leaves you fitting in around the edges. But when he sees you as his future, that structure shifts. You're no longer an afterthought. You're part of the blueprint. And pay attention to this, he includes you not just in the good moments, but in the practical ones. The unglamorous conversations, the planning, the logistics, the responsibilities. That's where commitment lives, not in fantasy, but in function. Anyone can talk about dreams. It takes intention to ask, how do we make this work? This inclusion also reveals emotional maturity. It means he's no longer making choices solely based on impulse or convenience. He's thinking long-term. He's weighing consequences. He's considering stability. And that level of thought only shows up when something matters enough to protect. What you should never have to do is convince a man that your voice deserves space. When it's right, that space is already there. You're invited in, not because you demanded entry, but because he recognizes that a future without your input would feel incomplete. This is why you'll feel calmer around a man who sees you as his future. There's less uncertainty, less mental noise. You're not constantly adjusting your expectations or lowering your needs to maintain harmony. Harmony already exists because he's working with you, not around you. And here's the quiet truth beneath it all. A man only builds with someone he plans to keep. Inclusion is preparation. It's how commitment starts long before it's ever spoken out loud. When your presence influences his decisions, it's because your place in his life is no longer temporary. When a man truly sees you as his future, the way he handles conflict changes. It's not about grand gestures or declarations of love. It's about the little quiet choices he makes when tension arises. A man who isn't sure, who hasn't yet decided, often treats disagreements as battles to be won. He deflects, argues, or shuts down. But a man who knows he wants you in his life sees conflict differently. For him, the relationship matters more than being right. You'll notice it first in the way he listens. He doesn't interrupt to defend himself. He doesn't immediately dismiss your feelings. He leans in, asks questions, and seeks to understand. And when he speaks, it's measured, not defensive, not explosive, not cruel. The language he uses is intentional. Words are not thrown carelessly because he knows that damage done in anger is rarely forgotten. A man who sees you as his future protects the connection above his ego, and that is an extraordinary thing to witness. It's in the choices he makes after disagreement, too. He doesn't ignore problems or sweep them under the rug. He addresses them because he values resolution over winning. Even when the conversation is uncomfortable, even when emotions are high, he stays engaged. He understands that true closeness is built in the messy moments, not just the easy ones. He chooses clarity, patience, and respect, knowing that how he navigates these moments will define the longevity of what you share. You'll also notice a shift in how he reacts emotionally. A man who is uncertain can be reactive, lashing out when stressed, frustrated, or challenged. His mood dictates his presence, leaving you second-guessing and anxious. But when he sees you as his future, He starts to regulate his own emotions because he understands that emotional storms have consequences. He doesn't avoid or suppress his feelings, he manages them. He knows that stability is not just comforting, it's necessary for a shared life. Another sign is consistency in accountability. He admits mistakes without hesitation. He apologizes sincerely when he's wrong, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a genuine acknowledgement. This isn't performative, it's fundamental. A man who values the relationship over temporary pride knows that showing humility and integrity strengthens trust, and trust is the foundation of a future together. And here's something women often overlook. This protection of the connection is also about discretion. He doesn't gossip about your arguments. He doesn't play out disagreements for public consumption, or use conflict as leverage. Respect for your privacy and for the intimacy you share is a hallmark of a man who has imagined a life with you. He understands that your bond is sacred, and he treats it accordingly. How he handles conflict outside your private world mirrors how he treats it inside, carefully, intentionally, responsibly. This behavior also signals emotional intelligence. He isn't just avoiding drama, he's actively choosing constructive patterns. He's thinking ahead about the emotional impact of his words and actions. He recognizes that love isn't tested by perfection, but by how difficulties are navigated together. And when you see a man act this way, it's unmistakable. You feel safe, you feel heard, you feel valued in a way that goes beyond mere attraction or infatuation. Ultimately, a man who sees you as his future doesn't treat connection casually. He understands that relationships are fragile in their early stages and that the way conflict is handled early sets the tone for decades to come. He protects what matters, not just for himself, but for both of you. And in that protection, there is clarity, there is purpose, there is reassurance that what he feels is not fleeting and what he wants is enduring. And the most remarkable part, you don't have to demand this. You don't have to teach him how to behave or prove your worth to earn it. It emerges naturally when he has decided that you are not just a chapter, but the story he wants to keep writing. When a M and sees you as his future, he stops keeping you in the corners of his life reserved for convenience. You're no longer someone he only calls when he has free time, someone who fits into gaps between work, friends, or hobbies. Instead, he opens the doors to his real world. He introduces you to the people who matter to him, and he lets you see the parts of life that he doesn't usually show. This is one of the clearest signs that you've moved from being an option to being part of a plan. At first, it may seem subtle. Maybe he starts by inviting you to meet a close friend or a family member at a small gathering. You notice that he wants you there not just to look nice, but to genuinely participate in his world. It isn't performative or forced. It's natural. You are allowed in because he's imagining you there in the long term. And this is important to understand. A man will not reveal his inner world, the one he protects carefully, to someone he's unsure about. That world is sacred, and access to it is a sign of trust and intention. You begin to see consistency in how he shares himself. It isn't just social exposure, it's daily life. You notice that he talks about his work, his goals, his routines, his responsibilities without the need to impress you. He doesn't sugarcoat the mundane or hide the struggles. He includes you in the realities of his life, the logistics, the obligations, the choices he makes every day, because he's imagining you beside him in those very moments. You're no longer outside looking in, you're a participant. And this inclusion carries a quiet power. It tells you who he is when no one is watching. You see how he treats people he cares about, how he navigates responsibilities, and how he reacts when life isn't convenient or easy. This transparency is an unspoken promise. He's showing you his reality because he intends for you to be a part of it, not a spectator. A man who only wants short-term attention keeps these layers hidden, but a man who sees a future with you reveals them naturally. It's also in the patterns of everyday life. He doesn't cancel plans lightly, and he doesn't compartmentalize you to certain times or places. He communicates when things are busy. He keeps you in the loop about what's happening, and he shares experiences that are important to him. You're no longer just a companion for leisure or convenience, you're integrated. And that integration feels effortless because it reflects his genuine desire to include you in his life, not just his calendar. This willingness to share his real world is also a test of intimacy. When he introduces you to the people and places that matter most to him, he is showing you that he trusts you. Trust isn't built in dramatic speeches, it's built in these quiet, consistent gestures. It's in letting you see both the highlights and the ordinary, trusting that your presence belongs naturally alongside his reality. A man who hides everything, who only allows glimpses, is keeping you at arm's length. But when he opens the full picture, he's saying without words, you belong here, and you will notice a difference in your own sense of security and belonging. You feel seen not just for moments of fun or attraction, but as a constant presence in his life. You are no longer adapting to his world, he is adapting his world to include you. That's the difference between someone who is infatuated and someone who is intentional. Infatuation is fleeting, intention is deliberate. Integration of life is the clearest signal of long-term vision. A man who includes you in his real world doesn't make you wonder about your place. You are present not because you forced it, not because you demanded it, but because he chose it. And when you notice this consistency, this openness, you feel the calm certainty that comes from being seen as irreplaceable. This is how love, when it's meant to last, shows itself quietly and steadily through inclusion, trust, and the willingness to share the life he's building, not just the one he's enjoying in passing. When a man sees you as his future, the way he talks about tomorrow changes. Future plans stop feeling awkward or forced. They stop being something you tiptoe around or wish he would bring up. Instead, he begins to speak naturally in terms of we and us, without hesitation, without dramatics, without feeling like he's making a commitment just to impress you. It's not about grand declarations or flashy promises. It's about PR, practical, everyday planning that quietly signals where his mind and heart are headed. You'll notice it in the small things first. He'll talk about what the weekend might look like a month from now, asking if you want to join him, not as an afterthought, but as part of the vision. He'll discuss trips he's considering, social events, or even home projects, always framing them with your presence in mind. You become an integral part of his considerations because, in his mind, you already belong there. He doesn't have to ask permission for every little thing. He naturally factors you into what comes next because your place in his future is assumed, not negotiated. This is where the difference between infatuation and intention becomes crystal clear. A man who is uncertain, or who only sees you as a temporary connection, talks about the future lightly or avoids it altogether. He keeps things vague because he doesn't want to commit. There's always a reason to postpone, a reason to hedge, a reason to leave the door slightly open. But a man who is serious, one who sees you as his future, plans forward confidently. He doesn't need to hedge because he has already made a decision internally. That certainty carries through in how he speaks, how he organizes his life, and how he communicates. And this future talk isn't about pressure. It's not heavy-handed or overwhelming. He doesn't lay out a timeline like a contract. It's woven naturally into the conversation. He mentions a dinner in 2M, aunts, or a small trip next season, in the same way he talks about his favorite book or a song he heard. It feels normal, comfortable, inevitable even, and that is the beauty of it. When you are part of his vision, the future doesn't feel like a risk or a test. It feels like the natural order of things. You'll also notice he starts thinking practically about the ways you fit into his life long term. Not just socially, not just romantically, but in the routines, the responsibilities, the daily logistics. He'll consider how your schedules align, how your preferences fit with his, how he can build a life that works for both of you. And again, this isn't something he does because he's trying to impress. He does it because his brain has already adopted the concept of us, and his actions naturally follow that thinking. Another sign is his calmness around commitment language. He doesn't stumble when using we, us, or our plans. He doesn't avoid discussing long-term scenarios out of fear. He brings them up casually, comfortably, almost unconsciously, because he doesn't fear what commitment would mean. He has already decided internally that he wants you in his life, and that quiet certainty removes the hesitation and the games. There's no need to manipulate, no need to prove anything. The future is simply being acknowledged and shaped together. And the truth is, this consistency in planning, in thinking about tomorrow with you in mind, is one of the clearest indicators of intention. Anyone can flirt or entertain, but not everyone will thoughtfully consider how your life fits with theirs over time. The ones who do are the ones who imagine a life built together and are actively moving in that direction. When you notice him naturally including you in plans, speaking in terms of we without prompting, and thoughtfully considering how your life intertwines with his, you feel a rare kind of security. You realize that this isn't temporary. It isn't wishful thinking. It's real and it's deliberate. And that quiet, consistent vision of the future, without drama, without performance, is how you know he sees you not as a chapter, but as the story he wants to continue writing. When a man sees you as his future, his emotional investment shifts in ways that are unmistakable, even if subtle at first. He doesn't just invest when it's convenient, when he feels like it, or when everything is easy. He invests even when it's uncomfortable, even when it requires patience, vulnerability, or courage. And this emotional investment isn't about grand gestures or flashy demonstrations. It's about presence, attention, and effort, especially in the moments where most men would withdraw. You'll notice it in conversations that matter. He doesn't avoid the tough talks. When something is bothering you, when fears arise, or when the relationship needs clarity, he doesn't shut down, excuse himself, or brush things aside. He stays. He listens. He asks questions. He engages fully. And he does it not because he has to, but because he understands that your feelings, your needs, and your emotional state are important to him in a way that transcends convenience. He knows that investing emotionally now prevents misunderstandings and builds a foundation that lasts. This investment also appears in how he reacts when you are vulnerable. A man who isn't serious often recoils from emotional intimacy. He can be charming when things are light and easy, but when the conversation turns inward, when fears or insecurities are exposed, he disappears or changes the subject. But a man who sees you as his future leans in. He validates your experience. He holds space without judgment. He recognizes that vulnerability is not weakness, it's connection, and he's willing to meet you there. You'll also see it in the consistency of his attention. Emotional investment isn't one-off effort, it's repeated and reliable. It shows up in how he checks in, how he remembers details you